All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Please let me know if you can hear me. I'm using this fancy lapel mic, and I want to make sure that it works. So give me a thumbs up in the chat if you guys can hear me. All right. Is that a yes? No, maybe so. I can't tell. But hopefully you guys can hear me. Welcome to. Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate that. So welcome to another edition of the relationships series. Excited to be here today to discuss. Thank you so much. One of my favorite topics, relationships. And today, as you can see, we'll be talking about building a lifelong romance at any age. And so we'll be talking a little bit about romantic relationship, of course, and looking at a few things that might be interesting as well as important to us. So, um, so, so thank you guys for being here. And let me just do this real quick so that I don't have to. Um, Sorry, just one second. Okay, perfect. All right, so thank you guys again for being here. My name is Genevieve, if you don't know me, and I am a psychotherapist in Ontario, Canada. I love all things relationships. I love to travel. I love teaching. I love theater. And of course, most of all, I love talking about this topic and everything that has to do with this topic, because I think that we were created for relationships, and relationships add the most joy and beauty and diversity to our lives, and sometimes as well the most hardship and the most pain. And so it would do us well to learn how to do relationships better, because it is the essence of our existence, our being, and our purpose as human beings. Um, so today we're going to touch on love and romance, more specifically building a romance. And I think we've been sold the narrative about love that feels good, that looks sexy, that is desirable, and it is. But I think today we want to have sort of a real talk, more of a real talk, so we can also look at how much work is required in building this romance or this type of relationship, so that we can have the kind of love that's worth keeping for a lifetime. So again, we'll go through some slides. It's very informal in terms of our conversation. You guys can chip in, chime in. I'll keep an eye on the chat. And so you can post things in there if you are in listening mode, if you're at work or what have you. And then, I'll sort of read the comments and so on so that we can all have input. But of course, throw your hand up and put your mic on and uh, and say what you have to say as well. So here's we'll sort of ground ourselves with which we normally do each week in our topic, and give ourselves some definitions to frame our conversation. And so I have building, I have lifelong, and I have romance, because that's our topic. And I really want us to get a handle on what it is we're talking about. So we're talking about building, which is the process of or the business of constructing something, right? So we know sort of by, I guess, exposure, what it takes to build things, right? So we've seen buildings going up or houses going up or what have you. And it requires work, it requires effort, it requires a team of some sort. Um, and it requires time, right? So we want to look at that as a sort of a frame for us as we talk about what we're talking about. And then lifelong, lasting or remaining in a state throughout a person's life. So we're looking at longevity here. We're looking at long-term sustainability, what is going to last. And then romance, which is a feeling of excitement and mystery associated with love. And I'm sure we all have listened to love songs and watched, Disney movies and whatnot. So I think we have a good grasp of what it is we are trying to build and have and sustain lifelong. Okay. So again, I'm not an expert. I just have a passion for conversation and for relationships, for reflection and introspection around this topic. And so what I present and what I say are mostly opinions and things that I've read and researched and experienced as a therapist working with couples. But again, I'm not an expert. I'm a passionate person. And so I encourage open sharing and for us to be mindful as we do share, to be, open, respectful, all that good stuff. But the goal is to take sort of a mindful stance and to pause and to observe and to notice your own ideas and thoughts coming forward, and then just present them in a nice and respectful way. And of course, we don't want to be disrespectful or condescending at all. So let me see here. So here we go. We're going to do an overview. We're going to talk about love after loss, because it's a reality, that loss is a part of life. We're going to talk about the search. So the search for that lifelong romance, and what some of the building components are. We're going to talk about personal growth and how that factors in to the search and to the lifelong building process. We're going to talk about enjoying singleness, building a strong foundation for ourselves. And then, of course, I have a personal challenge for us as we close out and look at next week and answer any questions that we do have. So let's talk about healing after loss. So the reality of life is that death happens, divorce happens, and drought happens. And when I talk about death, many of us who are older and who've lived some life have experienced the death of a loved one. But when we're talking about romance, some of us have experienced the death of a loved, like our romantic partner. And so we want to talk about what it looks like to grieve and to open ourselves up again to the possibility of love after we've experienced a death. And then, of course, a divorce, which can be similar to a death in terms of the grieving process, because it requires saying goodbye and letting go. And then, of course, starting anew or afresh, or being open once again to inviting that kind of intense love and romance into our lives. And then, of course, drought. I sometimes encounter with individuals sort of in their 30s, sometimes 40s. I know there was a movie a long time ago, it's called 40-Year-Old Virgin, and that idea still stands. So some of us, especially in our 30s and 40s, have not had the opportunity to engage in a romantic relationship or in a deep, intimate, knowing relationship in the way that we would have liked. And so and that's very common for us, even these days. As we kind of get into this, like, social media, what is it called, dating apps, all that kind of stuff. So the climate and the platform for creating bonds and for building romantic relationships, it has changed. Like, the game has totally and completely changed, right? Before, we would meet people in bookstores and libraries, and we would encounter folks and talk and have face-to-face conversation, whereas now the major way that people connect and look for, search for romantic connection is through screens and through apps and so on. So the platform has changed, the climate has changed, the culture has changed completely. And we have to also take that into consideration as we pursue connection. So drought is a real thing. Many people have not had the kind of relationships that they've wanted. They've not, they've never been kissed, or they're 40-year-old virgin, or they've just never gotten to the marriage space or the marriage place or engagement or what have you. And so that is also a loss for us, right? So we have to recognize what's required in these particular forms of loss, if we've experienced them. And so I put grief in the corner there for us to recognize that grieving is a necessary step for us to be open to the process of building that lifelong romance. And so if we don't grieve, then we are incapable or unable, or it'll be monumentally harder. I've actually never seen it happen, but it'll be most difficult to move into a space where we're able to find what we need, to build that lifelong romance, right? To sustain it, to commit to it, to be motivated to continue in it, because it takes effort, it takes energy, right? So I think sometimes when we think about it, we think, okay, we can just leave the past behind and forget about it all and get over the things that we've been through, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a death, or whether it's just a period of drought in our lives, where we haven't had anybody pursuing us, or we haven't felt the need to pursue anybody else. there's been sort of a loneliness time or an alone period, maybe not dating or what have you. Like those are seasons where we need to recognize grief. uh, Grief can happen and needs to happen because they were seasons of loss. We've lost something. And so when our response to loss has to be grief, and grief in a very intentional and open way, not in this like weird denial suppressing, I'm over it, it is what it is kind of way, but like in an intentional way, acknowledging what's required. And we have 7 stages of grief, and that's a pretty common model for dealing with grief, where we walk through denial, we walk through sorrow, we walk through depression, we walk through anger, we walk through all of the stages, not linearly, but in and throughout the grieving process. And then we come out on the other side with new hope and new desire and new acceptance of the new way in which we are going to go forward in our lives. And we get to decide that if we do the grieving properly. We don't want to get stuck in that space of sort of denial, right? So I want to capture this piece because it's so important for the building process. When we're looking at lifelong romance, we're looking at opening ourselves up and being intimate with another individual on this level. So when it comes to death, my caveat, I guess, is to look at where you're at. If you've experienced death, you are not dead, and so it's important for you to look at how to live now. When it comes to divorce, obviously, it's hard, and we come to the place where we're like, oh, maybe I'm not lovable, or maybe nobody wants me, or maybe I'm never going to find love again. Some of us get into the resentment, bitterness space. Some of us just completely give up. But it's important for us, if we want to build a lifelong romance, to grieve that divorce, that loss, that stage of our lives, and to decide how we are going to open ourselves up to love again. And then also to enjoy the fullness of whatever the relationship was and how it shaped us and brought us to the place where we're at today. And I think that's really important in the grieving process. And I know, and this is important for, I come from a West Indian, West African background, and a lot of my older female role models are not married anymore, are no longer married. Like my parents are divorced, and so even my mother, and a lot of matriarchs that I see in West Indian culture don't get remarried. They're culturally speaking, many decide to stay alone, to remain alone, to remain sort of in this drought space, because of many reasons, whatever hardships or fears, insecurities, or just lack of willingness to walk through grief in an intentional way, and then be open to the risk and the possibility of being hurt again, or take the chance again at love and at the building process. And some just don't want to invest, that energy again, and I get it. But if we do want to, we have to get to the place where we're best able to, and that requires for us to grieve after loss. And again, many of us, we need to say goodbye and really lean into the loss and go through the grief, so that we can be open to it again. And that means open to the search, right? So the search is the journey that we take. And I put hope, work, and expect. So hoping in the search, working in the search, and expecting good things in the search. We really live in interesting times right now. The tapestry is so different with the interwebs and dating apps and whatnot. And the potential for meeting people and finding love is just it's tougher. It's more challenging. But in this intentional way that we seek building a lifelong romance, I want us to really understand the power of hope, the power of hoping in our quest, right? So hope opens us up to seeing possibilities, to being grateful, to feeling better. And that all leads into the romance space. And then, of course, working, it is indicative of the search, right? So love is worth working for and worth searching for in the minds of those who pursue and want it. And so we have to look at what building requires, what searching requires, and what working requires, right? So the idea here, and I put these little gems here, these little diamonds here, the idea here that I have is that it's love and romance are like one of the greatest things that we can ever have, like in life. And because it is that way, I think a lot of us take for granted what's required in order to have it in a quality way. And so we settle for like these strange kinds of relationships that aren't fulfilling, or that are sort of surface, or that are kind of fairy tale-ish, but they're not real. They're not like deep, authentic. Um, and I think because the kind of love that most of us are searching for, and that Disney movies talk about, and I'm in love with love, and I love Disney movies. No knock against them. I have a lot of knocks, but anyway, I digress. The point is that the love that we are looking for, the romance that we're looking for, requires work, and it's worth it. It's worth the work. And so I put the gems there because, like, diamonds and gold and precious stones and whatnot, they're just not lying around. That's why they're so valuable. That's why they're so important. Kevin, I see your hand up.
I like this gemstone
Talk to us.
reference. Can you hear me?
Are you there? Uh-oh.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? How about now?
Okay, Kev, I can't hear you, but
Shoot.
uh-oh.
Okay, somebody
Maybe
says
I
they can
can't
hear
hear
me.
you. Why can't I hear you?
Uh, let's see here. How about now? Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay, a few people saying they can hear me. Basically, I was liking this gemstone reference that you have going on here, because the gems and quality gems, they don't just appear. It takes a while for them to form. You have to go digging deep to get them. And even when you do at that point, then it takes work for them to bring out the luster, the quality, the cut. Things have to be chipped away, in order to achieve what you're looking for. So there's, I don't know if that's where you were going with this, but I really like this, the way this ties in. So I just wanted to share a couple quick points with you.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? That's weird. Okay, I don't know. I didn't touch anything. So, yes, that is where I was going with that, right? Like that idea that gems and precious stones and so on are treasure, and we dig for them, but it requires so much work for us to get there, right? For us to get down to the nitty gritty, get under the ground, and so on. I mean, people chop off hands and die for diamonds for the search, right? And so when we recognize that something is valuable to us because it's rare, we do the work to get it. And I think that's what's important when it comes to the building process, especially when it comes to love. We have to be willing to go and seek for it, to look for it, to search for it, to find it, and to recognize its value. So yeah, definitely when it comes to the search. And then also the last piece was to expect it, right? Because people go to diamond mines and they expect to find diamonds, like they hope for them. That's what drives them to the place, and they work for it, and then they expect to find what they're searching for, which is this treasure, this valuable thing that they draw out of the ground. And of course it requires refining. Even after you find gold, guess what? You have to go through such a refining process for it to become like this, for it to become shiny, like the things that we wear, like the jewelry that we wear, right? And it has to go through the fire. It has to go through a refining process. And I think that's a really good imagery for us to use as we search for this thing that is so beautiful and so fulfilling and so awesome and so valuable and so powerful in our lives. So yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Thank you for that. I also wanted to highlight some romance killers.
Oh,
This is
sorry,
from
before
John
you go
Gottman.
on,
Go ahead.
I was about to type, but I figured, let me just say it.
No, say something.
No two gemstones are alike. So while there may be
Ooh, yes.
similarities, right? While there may be similarities, don't expect them to look the same. So what may work in some situations may not necessarily be for you exactly. There may be something, there may be a tool that was applied in order to achieve a certain cut, but the cut that would bring out the luster and the brilliance from one particularly shaped diamond may not necessarily work or bring out, it has to be applied a little bit differently in order to
Love
bring
it.
out the luster and the brilliance in another differently cut diamond.
Yes,
So
I love it.
understanding
Love it.
what you're trying to achieve is also key.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Thank you for that. Big point. Big point. No two gems are alike. My goodness, we can't compare these things, right? Um, it's so important for us to recognize that even as we go forward, because it's definitely tempting to compare
Come in,
our
come in. Oh,
our forward with our past. Who's yelling at me? Okay, that would be Erica. I'm gonna mute you, Erica. Yeah, so definitely important for us not to compare, for us to go forward with, just sort of that open mind to find the beauty and the luster in the gem that we're looking to find going forward. Here's some romance killers. This is The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse by John Gottman. And I think, again, it's really important for us to ground ourselves in what we cannot have in a lifelong romance. Like John Gottman is one of the foremost leading researchers in relationships and marriages and couples in the world. And he can predict the outcome of conversations of relationships with like above 90% accuracy based on whether or not these things are present. Above 90% accuracy is very high. Okay. So if he can, based on the way that couples interact, predict based on these things, then it's important for us to recognize what we are doing for ourselves, if these things are present, and then how to combat them. So criticism is one, defensiveness is another, contempt is another, and stonewalling is another. So criticism, I think we get the idea, insulting people and talking down to other people and criticizing people and their dreams and how they are, or what their decisions are, or whatever the case. Any kinds of insults, criticism is just not helpful in any kind of building process. And I remember actually did it was a workshop, team building workshop. This was years ago, and they had us do puzzles. They put us in groups and they had us to do puzzles. And in the groups, they were evaluating what kinds of speech. So they would walk around, the researchers, and people would be like, "Hurry up! Like, okay, let's go faster," because we were in competition with the other groups. And they checked and saw how many puzzle pieces we put together right after, and then they had us do the exercise again. But they gave us an instruction. So they said, while you're doing the puzzle this time with your group, give positive reinforcement. So give some, some like, "Oh, you're doing good, you're doing well," and so on. And what happened was phenomenal. Every single group was able to put together like double the amount of pieces in the puzzle with encouragement and positive reinforcement than they were with "Hurry up, okay, we got to beat the other group," with like a competitive, sometimes critical spirit. Or critical feedback. So it was amazing. So I know that criticism in a relationship just has no place whatsoever. And that doesn't mean we're not going to, sometimes slip our tongues and whatever, but we have to be able to do the repairing process, right? And that shouldn't be a norm or anything common in our relationships. Defensiveness comes out in like, but you, because we do this a lot. Somebody brings something to us, whether it's a parent or a family member, whatever. We know ourselves. And so we are unable, for whatever reason, because we feel shame or because of our insecurities or whatever the case is, we can't accept what they're saying to us. And so we say things like, "Well, but you did this and you did that." And we don't take responsibility for what we're bringing or what we're contributing to the lack of health in the relationship. So defensiveness is a romance killer, like dead, 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 dead. Okay. Defensiveness, no place. What I recommend is that you say yes. Like always say yes. Like you hear something, if your partner brings something to you, somebody brings something to you, say yes first, right? Yes, accept it, receive it, and then respond to the thing instead of, but you did this and but you did that and I didn't do that and I didn't mean it like that. And I don't do that. Dead, dead. Okay. Romance killers. You will not be building a lifelong romance. You will be taking bricks off of that wall. I promise. Contempt is very like having sort of a condescending tone. I think I'm better than you, or I'm smarter than you, or just lack of honor in some cases, right? So if you just don't honor your partner, you don't like them, why are you with them if you don't like them? My goodness, just stop, just go your own ways. But contempt, romance killer, don't bring that into your relationship. If that's a problem for you, go to counseling or therapy or go somewhere and do something about that so that you don't bring that into your relationship, because your relationship will not last 90% of the time, okay? And then stonewalling looks like shutting your partner out, especially when there's an issue, silent treatment, that sort of passive aggressive thing, withdrawal. When, you know, there's an issue, you're like, oh no, I don't want to talk about it. And so, but that is a romance killer, and it will participate. It will end your relationship 90% of the time. So if you do any of these things, if we do any of these things, and we will do them at some point, make sure we're doing the work of repair in these areas. And so some of the best ways, I guess, to repair would be to say yes, again, to respond positively. John Gottman would say to respond positively to bids. So bids would be like bids for attention or bids for affection. So if your partner, reaches out to you by text, respond to the text, even if you can't give a full answer. Just, hey, I saw your text. We'll respond later. So bids are when we reach out for proximity. We reach out in an attempt to connect with our partners. So responding positively to those bids, or turning towards, even physically turning towards, looking at your partner in the face, offering, kind words. Those are things that help to enhance and build lifelong romance. Because each time we turn toward our partner, or when we respond positively to a bid, we're actually building connection with our partner. And when we feel connected to our partner, one, we can just solve our problems better. And two, we feel more secure. So when we feel more secure and we feel more connected, then we are liable then to continue on in a sustained relationship. So just being mindful of these romance killers and some of the things that we can do. I think that admiring your partner and putting your partner above yourself is one of the best things that you can do in your relationship. And so seeing your partner as worthy, seeing your partner as good, and I know it's hard sometimes, because when we get hurt, we tend to see the negative. We tend to see like those areas, but it's important to really govern our thoughts and our minds, our mindsets in this area, so that we can look at our partners and really pay attention to the positives and to the good things. This doesn't mean that we overlook or we allow to slide the things that are part of the relationship that are unhelpful or that are maladaptive. It means that we address them in an honorable and loving way. It means that we address them in a way that brings us to either resolving them, or coming up with some kind of plan, to do something differently. But you always want to treat your partner with respect and with regard. And that's so important for the lifelong aspect, right? It's a constant building process, a constant piling on of bricks that will sustain the longevity of the relationship. Okay. So maybe some points or some things to take with you. I always love stats, because stats give us the real on what's really going on in the world. So I have 3 stats here, which I thought were interesting. 88% of Americans say they got married for love. So a huge shift from, say 50, 60, 70 years ago, when we didn't necessarily have love and romance as a foundation for relationships. We had more, sort of economy, family legacy, things like that. And even in most parts of the world now, there's still arranged marriages that maintain efficacy in terms of economics and relationships and so on. But
in America, or in, and that's similar for us as well, North America, most people get married for love. So we're looking for that romance. And so it's important for us to know how to build that. Only 4% of couples over 50 live together without being married, which is interesting as well. So most older folks like to live together and be married. And so most people who are cohabitating anyway, are younger. So in their 30s and 40s and so on. And then research shows that the best sex happens when we hit our 60s, which completely floored me. So I just thought that was an interesting stat to share, because it gets better, right? So most of us, if we're in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or what have you, just know that it gets better with time. Okay, and we do have something to hope for, to look forward to, and it's not too late. If there was a divorce in your 30s or 40s, it's not too late to build towards something that's long lasting. What if you live to your 90 or 100 and you're 40 right now? You still have, like, you could hit your 50-year anniversary. There's still a lot of life to live. So yeah, just sort of being hopeful, and that's just to infuse you with motivation to be hopeful. And I have a quote here. This is sort of in line with what kind of disposition we can have when we are single, in the searching phase or in the grieving space. Okay. So to love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance. And there's a scripture in the Bible that says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And we did a transformational conversation a couple weeks ago on me, myself, and I, which had to do with the self and how to treat the self. And it's really important to recognize that the stuff of, like, romance movies, the travel and the zooming off to Paris and the fancy dinners and the gifts and, the laughter and the longing looks into each other's eyes on the beach, like all that stuff comes from an internal space first. And it's so important to build that with the self first, so that you can go into a romantic relationship and offer that freely. And no holds bar. We're not looking for anybody to offer that to us. We need it. No, it's that you are entering into this great, awesome space of hopefulness and of like imagination and beauty. And we can offer that to someone else fully and wholly without any strings attached, because we've done that for ourselves. And to romance ourselves means that we have a lot of practice, right? And I think it's important for us to recognize the importance of this as we are searching in the search space, if we are single, at any age, right? If we're in our 40s, right? And we're opening up ourselves to love again, and we're grieving and we're letting go and we're moving forward, like to cultivate that romance on the inside of ourselves, for ourselves first. And I really do believe that building a strong foundation begins with us first. And so it's a pretty loud message now. I know I've seen it on memes, and I see it all over the place. This sort of love yourself kind of thing, the self-love message and self-care message. And I think our culture is catching on to what the fruit of that self-care message will what it will produce. So the fruit it will produce, healthier and more quality relationships all around. And of course, it's very true of building romantic relationships as well. So yeah, just sort of taking a note there. And I just thought of something, because this I heard long time ago. It was a quote. Anyway, it was a quote by it was a pastor, and he said, intimacy is into me see, like into me see. And that means allowing someone else to see into us. And that takes a lot of courage and vulnerability. But intimacy is required for authenticity, and authenticity is required for, like, self-love. Like, we have to be real with ourselves to love ourselves in all of, like, however we are, all the parts of ourselves. And I think that takes courage. It takes courage to do that for ourselves and to allow someone else into that space. And it takes zero courage to, like, stay in fear and in shame or in guilt or be comfortable and all that stuff. But it really does take courage to show yourself to another person and say, here I am in the raw, accept me as I am. And it also takes courage to see someone else or see into someone else in the raw and say, I'm going to accept you as you are. That doesn't mean you're going to stay as you are or they're going to stay as they are. We are constantly evolving and changing. But to say, here I am, willing to allow you to see me in the raw and me accept you in the raw and us grow and build together as we work through this like crazy life thing, right? So yeah, it's really interesting to sort of think about ourselves and building a romance with ourselves in that way, being able to see into ourselves and allowing other people to see into us in a really vulnerable sort of sort of honest way. Anyway, I have a definition here that I want us to go through and to evaluate for ourselves. I think this is a great foundation for us to start with. And I want you to notice what's not there as well as what is there. So this is a love definition. Love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy, love does not boast, love is not arrogant, love is not rude, love does not insist on its own way, love is not irritable, love is not resentful, love does not rejoice in wrongdoing, love rejoices in the truth, love bears all things, believes all things, love hopes all things, love endures all things, love never ends, and love never fails. Love is not easy. And it shouldn't be. It's so valuable and so powerful that it shouldn't be easily accessible to everybody, because if you're not willing to work for it, then why do you deserve it? Right? So, and that's, completely outside of the what's it called? The sort of work for your affection definition of love, more so on a personal level. So you deciding that you are going to give love rather than you deciding you're going to take love. And I think taking is sort of a weird thing, but I think we can receive love and expect reciprocal love if we're willing to pour out, right? We reap what we sow type of thing. And this is all unconditional. This is like, I'm doing this. I don't love you because you're lovable. I don't love you because you deserve it or because you've done something for me or given me a gift, but I love you because of me. I love you because I want to love you. I choose to love you. And that's a really different disposition than maybe what our culture would have us believe and would teach us. And I think this is a good sort of baseline, maybe not baseline, standard to reach for when it comes to love and when it comes to embodying love and searching for that lifelong romance, for us to do this on our own and for ourselves. And I want to notice what's not there. What's not there is sex, which I always found very interesting, because love is not sex. And I think it's an important part of relationships, especially building a lifelong romance. But I think sex is not the most important part, but it is an important part. And so when it comes to building, we're looking at what the foundation is, right? So the foundation is all of these things, because we need all these things to build upon. The deeper you build, the stronger you build your foundation, is the higher you can go, or the more sustainable your structure will be. And so this is a foundation that will get you to the building of the lifelong and the sustainable. And of course, it's part of romantic relationship, apart from, I know we are living in very strange and very, and that seems to be okay, but sex is actually a bonding experience, that helps to solidify and to model or symbolize the intimacy that has been built and the trust and support and relationship that has been built between two people. And so now I know, I can't remember her name, but I was listening to a lecture the other day, and she was talking about, and I'll probably, when I send out this email, I'll send it out to you guys, but she was talking about how, as humans, especially when it comes to romantic relationship, we're looking for a deeper level of intimacy and acceptance. We're looking for that support and that connection that is unlike any other relationship. And when we add sex into the mix early or before we build that, our natural internal mechanisms, like they move us towards believing that the relationship we have with this person is the kind of relationship that we've built. I don't know if I'm saying this right. So basically, we look for our sexual partners to provide support, security, safety, relationship, acceptance. We look for sexual partners to provide that level of intimacy that is natural or normal in regular relationship. But because we've kind of turned things backwards or turned things on their heads in our society, in our culture, a lot of people are sort of out here flailing around in the wind, like just completely confused and wondering why they're not fulfilled and why they're depressed and anxious and so on. And they're looking for something that they can't get because they haven't done it in the right way. And it's important to recognize that there are steps to this thing, right? And so building requires foundation. So relationship requires a foundation. Get to know somebody, get to know their likes and their dislikes, and figure out if you can trust them and all that good stuff. And then sexuality comes into the mix to solidify, or as it's like you're building on a foundation. If you're building like a skyscraper, like sex is like the fancy windows. It's like, the thing that makes it look nicer and feel nicer, or like the air conditioning on the inside, it makes it feel better, right? But it's not the foundation, and you can't build on it because everything else will fall apart. And that's what we're seeing in relationships, especially romantic ones. Nowadays, things are falling apart. Yeah, maybe I'll ask you guys, like, what your thoughts are as we. Uh-oh, did I lose you guys? Yep, you're back. Okay, thank you. I don't know where I cut out. I saw myself freeze on the screen. I was like, I don't know where it froze. So yeah, I was just wondering about you guys, just in terms of like what kinds of relationships you have and the kinds of expectations that you've had for relationships, especially when it comes to sexuality, and sort of sharing that part of self, maybe, I don't know, prematurely, or yeah, I don't know. You guys can share your thoughts and your ideas on that. I kind of have, my own ideas on that.
Hey Genevieve. Yeah, great content so far. I really appreciate it. Especially for me, it's the grieving process. Was going through that. Still, I'm kind of in the 7th phase. It's been a year and a half to just walking through that. I'm struggling with the 7th phase of acceptance, I think.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
and I actually had read something where, like, they were saying, like, divorce is like losing someone. Like there's a grief, there is like a death there, and I knew that through actually at the beginning of this process. So I knew I had to go through that process to get ahead. I think the challenge for me now is, how do you, like I have a son, so you're always seeing the person, so you're trying to figure out, how do I navigate amicably, I'm not saying that word properly, but well with that person while you're trying to, get out there again, and I never really dated a lot, it was, one other person before my wife, and then, you have your person, you think, right? So you're going like, oh man, I have this process now where I have to, like, I'm good with opening up to people, but it's just like, okay, now I have to find someone again that I want to invest into, or not invest into, but that connection. And I think I guess the question for me is the concern of, like, I know I've done a lot of work to get where I am right now, but in the back of my head is like, oh man, what if I do this again? You know, and what if somebody sees the same flaws and says they don't want to have anything with me, you know, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing your real life experience, right? Because that is a lot of where we are at this point. And many of us have experienced loss and divorce. And I'm gonna mute you because I hear feedback. So yeah, many of us have experienced, loss and divorce. And I think part of what I'm hearing here in terms of the question is how to, as you grieve and sort of come out of that space and decide, to move into that space again, like to entertain a new relationship, how to balance sort of amicably dealing with the old or the presence of the old, and then also how to open the self up courageously and risk the possibility of um, things not turning out the way that you want to again. Like it's the fear aspect, right? It's the fear component, and that's part of it. The part of this whole building process that we have to really own is taking the risk. It's like the jump. It's the challenge. It's the recognition that the risk, or sorry, the treasure is worth the risk. It's like, okay, but like, what is it about this thing that you really want? What is it that you really desire? And then taking that sort of idea or that image or that vision and saying to yourself, is it worth me taking the risk of falling again, of being hurt again, of, not of being divorced again? Like, is it worth that? Again, that has to be a choice. It has to be a choice on a personal level. We can't be afraid in this treasure hunt, so to speak, right? Like this is, what's the word? This is like it's a risk. Anything worth having requires risk and sacrifice. And so we have to decide whether or not for us, it's worth the risk and the sacrifice, right? And listening to you, and I know a little bit about you, but listening to you, thinking also about what you have to offer and about purpose, right? So purpose gets exponentially realized and experienced in the context of romantic relationship, because two are better than one all the time. Two, what is it? One will put 1,000, two will put 10,000, right? And so there's exponential return when it comes to connecting with somebody in a romantic, lifelong way. And so for you, even looking at it from your perspective, so not necessarily like, oh my goodness, what if this happens again? But oh my goodness, like what do I bring to the table? What do I offer? And how much of that will get realized and sort of like blown out of the water if I connect with somebody else? And we know prayer is a big thing, is a big part of that. And so doing that sort of our due diligence, doing that underlying work to manage our own fears, and disallow those fears from hindering us, from moving forward. Sorry, I saw something in the chat. I just can't. Where are you? Number one, cannot be afraid to fail. We're not perfect, and neither is the other person. Yes, thank you so much for that, Kevin. Introspection is huge. So it's important to also connect with people who have done some work. So I think we know, I heard a psychologist say it the other day. He said, we should find individuals who express themselves emotionally or treat their emotions in similar ways to we do. And so if someone has done their work and they recognize that they're not perfect, then it is unlikely that they'll be in that space where they're like, oh, I can't, you said alignment of values. I can't be with you because you're so terrible and they're blaming everything on you, or they're looking at all your flaws. Like most people who've done their own work, who have a level of self-awareness and maturity, they've done they'll do the introspection thing. They'll look at themselves first and how to change whatever their thoughts are, their feelings are, their emotions are, and then they'll re-enter, into engaging with you. So also during the search, to be more mindful of the selection process, right? And so how you're connecting and who you're connecting to, and then who you're willing to build with, right? Because that's a decision on your part. And you don't want to build with people who are just going to sit down by the side and watch you build and not build with you.
I just want to say something. Sorry, I didn't mean to unmute right away.
No, go
You
for
know
it.
what I've been noticing too is, so I've been to some of these dating apps, and I think, I'm turning 34 next month, and it's just like, when you're younger, you don't realize that there's so many other boxes you got to check off, kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? Like nowadays, like people are putting their profile, oh, they're vaccinated or not vaccinated, so okay, that's like top priority for them, or it's like, oh, I have a dog, well, I'm not a dog person, so then it's like, you have all these like other check boxes that like I didn't think about, back in the day, it's like,
Yeah.
before it's just my faith, are we gelling that way, are we gelling, similar values or whatever, but then it's like nowadays the value system has so expanded, are you for BLM, are you are you stand for these injustices and all these type of things, and if you don't, it's like that's another thing, so it's just like there's so many other boxes to tick off. It's more so in the last, like even more so in the last 3 years, 4 years, I would say, that has made it even more interesting. I wouldn't say complicated, it just makes it just more factors, really.
Yeah, and I personally would say, as you notice the list of things becoming longer that people, want in relationship, to really evaluate the quality of relationships that are present. I mean, longer lists don't make for better relationships. Like the more similar you are to the other person, homogeny, that doesn't make for better relationships. Like I mean, the facts and figures, the numbers and the stats and the research speaks for itself. Like just because you have, another person who likes Japanese chins, like doesn't mean you're going to have a great relationship, right? So it's important also to look at what's actually important for a relationship. If you have spiritual maturity, introspection, reflection, all the things, like we talk to older couples who've been married for 30, 40, 50 years, they're not going to say, oh yeah, we were the same person and we like the same things and we both like dogs or we both like to swim. Like, similarities don't make for great relationships. Work does. And that's the reality of the matter. No fighting doesn't make for a great relationship. In fact, that makes for a terrible relationship. Please don't do that. Please fight. Not with fists or knives or weapons or anything, but have the arguments and and talk about the things, please. But I think it's important for us to realize what fundamentally is required is in terms of the essence of a relationship and building a lifelong sustainable relationship versus what's trending, what's popular, what's valued in our society and so on. We have to look at the fundamentals, the foundational things. And that's what we want to talk. That's what, we're here to talk about today. Like the real stuff. Like, are you doing the work? Are you grieving? Are you searching? Are you working? Do you have a proper perspective and schema as it pertains to relationship? Do you know yourself? Are you loving yourself? Do you, like, those kinds of things are what make for the sustainable building blocks that will last a lifetime. Sorry, Kevin, you said alignment of values is important for the building process of relationship and so on.
Yeah, you were basically kind of touching on it anyway, and that's why it's correct. In that as the gentleman was pointing out, you're seeing a bunch of things show up that he wasn't thinking about before, and I was basically leading to the fact that when you see those kinds of things, that in and of itself is a marker. If that's what somebody is valuing is more important than some of the other more intentional and deeper criteria
Yeah.
That's a filter. That's a filter for itself.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Actually,
don't think that that's a box that you need to fit into. Oh shoot, I didn't consider this. Yeah, that may appear because you learn to grow, but recognizing what those filters may be. You know, I
yeah.
like dogs. She may like dogs. She may be a dog person or something like that, but she might like the idea of having a dog. But if you're willing to put in the work to actually owning a dog and
Right.
keeping a dog, you know, because somebody's gonna have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning when the dog wants to go doo-doo, and we live in
Right.
Canada and it's freezing outside. Is she willing to be that person, or is she expecting you to be that person?
Right. Yeah. And I love that point, right? The idea is very different from the reality. And so when we're talking about lifelong romance, we're talking about what's really required. This is not fantasy. This is not Disney. Although Disney is fun and it's got the colors and the princesses and what, like real life is not Disney. Real life is not, the rose-colored glasses and whatnot. Real life is real life. And so we have to get to the point where we're willing to sort of come back down to earth and set our expectations in a realistic way and make the choice to build with someone and know that that's going to require the 5 a.m.s or the prayer at 3 a.m. or the long conversations and the being vulnerable and all of the icky stuff that's hard. It's hard. If it was easy, like, we would all have it. The fact that we don't means something. It's hard. And we have to do the work every day, show up every day and decide, hey, we're going to love this person in all of their flaws. Hey, I'm going to show up in all of my flaws. Hey, I'm going to, it's that hard work that we decide to do every day that builds that lifelong romance. So here's a personal challenge to us all as we wind down. I put imagination, play, wonder, and awe. And so to invite some of these things into our pursuit and our search, right? So imagination, right? Imagining something different for our lives, playing again, having fun again, being in wonder of ourselves and the world and other people again, right? Not like sitting, sometimes when we watch TV too much, we're on the screens too much, we get like numb. We get numb to like beauty and wonder and just like being in awe of life and other people, the fact that we're humans and we get to do this like relationship thing. Sometimes that becomes sort of taken for granted. And so I want to invite us again to revisit these spaces as children, kind of, to play again, to imagine again, to rediscover ourselves, to have fun again, and to really use that as a catalyst to entertaining and working towards being open again to lifelong romance and connection on a intimate level with another human being who is flawed and nuanced, just like we are. So I want to invite us to into that space, and then of course I want to invite you guys back next week. Next week, ooh, I love this topic: secrecy versus privacy. The difference, because we have a lot of debates about this and what's okay in a relationship, what's not okay in a relationship, what should be shared, what should not be shared, what comes out of a place of fear, what comes out of a place of anyway, a lot of things. So I love this topic, and so we'll be talking about that next week. And I think sometimes it's the difference between shame, like being ashamed of our decisions, and being courageous and living in freedom, right? Because there's definitely a different source of secrecy versus privacy. So I want to invite you guys back next week. Download the Mentiverse app for the replays and for other great content. So I invite you guys to do that. And of course, if you have any questions, you can throw them at me. There's the survey link. If you want to copy that, you can fill in the survey for a chance to win a prize. And of course, I want your feedback, so you can always give me feedback. And then, of course, let me know what you guys want to hear more of as we talk about relationships, because it's just fun to have these conversations. if you want the replay, I will send that out later today. If you throw your email in the chat, and we'll close on that note. Hope you guys had a good time, and thank you so much for your feedback, for your input. I feel like I talk a lot sometimes, so you guys are so welcome and so invited to, like, you know, get in there. So thank you, Tim. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you guys for giving your input and for talking and interrupting me and my my long rants. Anyway, appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you for joining me for lunch and the relationship series. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Take care.
Bye now.